Welcome to another Astro Priestesses Roundtable. We are focusing on the Gemini Solar Month, and it begins with a big wow moment. As the sun moves into Gemini on May 20th, it's with the Pleiades. It's also with Sedna, and this is the first time the sun and Sedna have conjuncted in Gemini in like 11,500 years. It's been a really long time. And so we have this Sedna meeting with the source of life and light for our planet. The sun is the strongest symbol we have for source energy. So the Sedna is meeting with the source. And also the sun, on the day it enters into Gemini, is in some latitudes on the planet directly overhead, meaning there are no shadows cast around noon. And I'll put in the show notes a video on the days of no shadows, because it's super exciting and important. And we can always get reminded, even if you've seen it before, you might want to be reminded again of what's happening at this time. But if we are in a place where there are no shadows being cast during the time when the sun is entering Gemini, and it's also with the Pleiades. Now, this isn't always the case. The Pleiades are not always at zero. Well, 29 Taurus, a couple of the stars are at 29 Taurus, and most of the stars are already at zero Gemini. They move 1 degree every 72 years, and it takes 25,960 years or 80 years or something for it to come back to the place it's at right now. So this is another rare moment in time. And then so having Sedna there, having the sun there, having the Pleiades there, having the days of no shadows, where the sun, in some latitudes, they don't really have seasonal changes like spring, summer, winter, fall. They have more like the days when the sun reaches its zenith point. They literally built zenith tubes that were like about, maybe this big around, and the sun would light up these tubes into underground caves. They only on the days of no shadows. There's like 3 days. So the 19th, 20th, and 21st of May is when this is happening. And it was so important that they wanted to have a way of making it like a wow moment. And so now we know that they thought that it was a wow moment. We have even a bigger way of understanding that it's a wow moment, with Sedna being there, with the Pleiades being there, with the sun, and sourcing something new. So I know there's more I want to say, but I think I will start passing this along, because that's seems like a good idea. But just to say, as Mar said, as we started the recording, let's have fun. Let's have fun with Gemini, because Gemini is about fun and play. And we've been in just such a serious, intense time that it's time to have fun. So with that, I'm going to pass the fun along.
Yeah, and I would like to talk a little bit about the Pleiades, because I have a book here that it always comes to me during this time when the sun moves into Gemini and is in these degrees, because the seven sisters of the Pleiades, and is these stories all over the world, like the Australian Aboriginal, the old Greek, Native American, like everywhere, they have this story of seven sisters. And it's very interesting because they are being chased by an old man. And that it feels so much, and they represent the seven arts as well. And it feels that old man is the patriarchy, like chasing our muses and our creative genius. And it's time, and we have been talking about this in other videos when we were mentioning Sedna, that it's time of rewrite the story with Sedna. I think with the Pleiades, it's also important that they are not just being chased by an old man. It's like they have such a powerful energy. They are like the mothers of culture. And the seven Hathors in Egypt are very important to connect with seven faces of the goddess. Like the goddess is one, but then it has so many faces that we can take on and we can play with them. And I think that's the energy of the month, to play with our words as soon as the sun enters Gemini, to play with the energy, and it's being very heavy. And the change to Gemini is in such a like lightness of just move the energy. And it's very interesting that in shamanic astrology mystery school, like is said that Gemini is in service of a spirit. And I have gotten this question a lot, like how, like people can see how Virgo is in service of a spirit. People can see how like Pisces, but Gemini is like, how? Because it's humor. Like there is this sense of play, like sacred playfulness and humor as the way to change the energies of a room when they are like totally heavy. And I don't know why it comes to my mind a story that my mother always tell me, that in a funeral, I think it was her grandmother died, and she started dancing. She was 2 years old, and that is like such energetic change for everyone, and how like only one person who is in a mood of we don't have to take ourselves so seriously all the time can change the energy of a whole room and a whole atmosphere, and in so many senses. And I think these days of like from the 20th to 23rd and then the 25th, Jupiter enters Gemini, and then we will have the moon sun conjunction, not the moon, the Venus sun in Gemini. Like this is going to be the whole month, but before Venus and Jupiter conjunct in Taurus, at the end, at the very ending, May 23rd, and it feels such a blessing day as well. Like is this first feel the pleasure of the body, and then in the enjoyment of the mind and curiosity and playfulness. And I think this energy goes towards the whole month. And we will have also Mars conjunct the North Node. So just being who we are in Aries is also part of the equation. It's like we can show ourselves as we are. And if other people don't enjoy our presence, we can just change the presence and put it in somewhere else where we are enjoyed. But it's like not everyone is going to like us, but we need to like ourselves. I think that's something, because we cannot change our position towards our, like I will be with me my whole life, at least in this body. So it's responsibility in a way to like me and to love me and to find people who appreciate who I am. So I think that can be a mantra as well for everyone during this month, that not everyone has to like us, but we do need to like ourselves.
I love that. I love Gemini season. I think it's one of the most fun seasons. There's such a beautiful flexibility and versatility, adaptability. Gemini is yang, mutable air, so there's a lot of energy seeking externally, but it's changeable. It's ready for what's the next thing, what's the new season, but it's also tuning into what came before. It's kind of holding the space between multiple realities and dimensions. I always think of hopping timelines. When I think of Gemini, I think of shape-shifting energy, the capacity to shape-shift to meet the moment, to meet the person, to bring in the humor as needed, but to also bring in the question as needed. Like sometimes we need the question more than we need the answer, which I think Gemini reminds us of. Gemini is also the sacred fool and the holy trickster. So even for us, Gemini is one of the signs that Mercury hosts. So he is really inviting us to kind of step out of the boxes of our mindset and ask new questions, look into different areas, look in new directions, talk to different people, maybe strike up conversations where you wouldn't typically, and learn something new. So I think it's really exciting. There's, especially with Jupiter coming in, there's going to be a lot of amplification of this energy, and Jupiter's been doing a lot. Jupiter was just with Uranus. And so there's this amplification and liberation energy that's happening. And there's this new direction wanting to come through as Jupiter changes signs, especially because Jupiter will be entering the opposite sign of his typical hosting. Like usually Jupiter is really happy, for example, in Sagittarius or Pisces, his typical signs of affinity, where he can go really deep and go really wide and like get to the depth of things. But in Gemini, it's actually one of those times where it's a little bit more about breadth and going like 1 inch deep but 100 miles wide, and not necessarily needing to go super, super deep into any one thing, but it's like go as deep as is interesting and then change if you need to change. And that I think is so liberating, so freeing. It's like, I think there's that reminder that there's no rule around how much of a topic that we have to stay engaged with. It's really, there's a lot more freedom and there's fresh air coming in. And that actually brings up the Pluto in Aquarius as well, because we have Pluto in an air sign too, and Pluto's our underworld journey, helping us to do our soul retrieval, our true self reclamation, and it's also very connected to our collective evolutionary journey. And Jupiter will be trine Pluto. So there's this reminder that, oh, in order to do that deep work, we actually maybe have to learn some new things. Maybe we have to have some new conversations. We have to ask new questions. Maybe we have to be a little bit more adaptable, more versatile, but the focus nonetheless is air, is breathing, is perhaps being that breath of fresh air. You could, something that, especially when I'm ever holding space for people going through something challenging, like our Pluto journeys we were speaking about earlier. It's like, how can I embody a space where people can come up for air? Whatever that looks like, whatever the quality of the air that they need to take in. I don't have to tell them what that is, but just be the space. And that's a big piece of what I think Gemini can offer. It's almost being so present that there's no expectation. It's like when you're in a group of people and you know that your turn to speak is going to come. Are you listening to what everybody else is saying so that you can actually like be with them, or are you just waiting to speak? Are you waiting and thinking about what you have to say versus just being in the moment? And I think Gemini can be really excellent at contributing exactly what is needed in the moment if we're really listening. So it's a beautiful month for staying flexible in that way. And maybe it's not going to look super perfect. It's not going to be super polished, but it will be playful and more freeing.
Oh, I love that. And what you're speaking to really reminds me of the connection of Gemini with our creative muse and our ability to just kind of connect in with our creative muse in the moment, that spontaneity, that like improvisation that Gemini brings. And what's so interesting, I love how everyone's speaking about play and fun, because that is the Gemini energy, and we have been in such an intense time, like you pointed to, Kaylin. And also, we're just moving, over the last weeks with Venus moving into the underworld, which for many of us is probably going to continue to feel like an intense time. And so, for all of us, it really depends on what's going on with our personal astrology, where we are in different cycles. We don't feel every like underworld experience as intensely as the others, but for those that are like really continuing to be in the thick of an underworld experience, like I really just want to speak to you for a moment here. And there's this beautiful invitation with Venus journeying through the underworld this Gemini season, especially she'll be moving into Gemini, I believe May 23rd, right after that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And then there's this beautiful Venus Sun rebirthing energy and Gemini on June 4th. But with with Venus in the underworld on her journey, we've been through this, morning star 9-month cycle since August of 2023 of, stripping and surrendering and releasing false identities and false stories and things that we've taken on through our conditioning of the feminine that are not authentic to our own feminine essence or heart essence, you could say. And so we're walking in, the myth of Inanna, we're walking into the underworld completely stripped down and naked. And with Venus being in the underworld and Gemini and that Gemini star point there's this really beautiful invitation when we're stripped down naked in the underworld. We're like a blank canvas. And there's this beautiful invitation to get to play, come back to the present moment again and again. Gemini for me is always this reminder to have that beginner's mindset, come back to the present moment. And when we don't know who we are anymore, the old versions of ourselves have been stripped away and we're not exactly sure, well, who am I in this moment? We have this beautiful invitation to just come to the present moment and get to discover who we are in a new way again and again, and see ourselves and discover ourselves from different perspectives and different ways of seeing things. And we get to weave a new story together that is more true to our essence and more true to our heart. Maybe our creative muse, who is us, can come through and speak a new story of who we are in this present moment that is true to our heart. So there's this, and how can we bring play into the underworld, sacred play, that sometimes we think when we're in the underworld, oh, we have to be so serious and there's not like this moment for play. But can we come into the present moment and really connect with our creative muse or our divine inner child? And can we bring play into the underworld? I think there's a beautiful invitation to experience an underworld, perhaps an underworld and rebirthing journey, and in a new creative, playful way.
I love that so much. And you were saying that, Jamie, I was thinking Cookie Monster, because in the underworld is where we often face our fears and the things that we haven't wanted to look at and that kind of thing. But how do we make it more playful? Well, Cookie Monster would be a more playful way to look at that. So that's what came up for me when you were saying that. And another thing about because Venus is conjunct the sun in Gemini, and the sun again being the source. So how is she sourcing new ways of being more playful, having more fun? I think that we've been conditioned in our culture, we've talked about this many times before, to be serious, to work hard, to get the job done, to do what we must do. And we haven't had a lot of room for play. But if I think about it, I just spent a lot of time in New Mexico, and they were having some gatherings where they're drumming and dancing, and it's like playful. Makes me think of Kokopelli, who's also, the playful aspect from the native cultures in the United States. And so Venus is getting sourced with some aspect of playfulness. And in fact, when she's in the underworld, it's not like she's in the dark, she's in the light. And so something that you might find helpful for those who are listening is that we're going to be doing a Venus Underworld free offering through Venus Alchemy. I'll put a link in the show notes. If you haven't seen that yet or haven't signed up, you can get more details about that, because it's just such an amazing opportunity, and we'll do some ceremony around it and help, we can all come together and see how are we going to tune into greater, more playfulness around that. And another thought that occurs to me is how laughter is medicine. I think the Reader's Digest used to have every time they published their Reader's Digest magazine, it would have laughter is the best medicine section. So at least that we didn't completely lose our connection to that. And so this is a great time to watch a fun movie, something that's funny, go see a comedy show, do things that will help you laugh and get more into that playful place within yourself. And then there is a Mars conjunction with Chiron, I think it is on May 29th. And this causes me to feel into, because I've been going through my own experience around the Aries mystery. So Chiron in Aries, Mars in Aries at 22 degrees Aries. Also, interestingly, with a star called Beta Catos in the constellation of Cetus the whale. And Cetus is, so Beta Catos is the belly of the whale. So when the belly of the whale, in the belly of the whale, is also like in the underworld. It's like a time where in the story of Jonas and the whale, he's like trying to get away from, he's going the opposite direction of where he's been sent, and he doesn't want to go do what he's supposed to do. And then he gets swallowed by a whale, and he sits in the belly of the whale, and finally he says, okay, fine, I'll go do what I've been assigned to do. And then he gets out of the belly of the whale. So Mars is going to be with Chiron, the shamanic healer, in the belly of the whale. And the star with the belly of the whale. So that feels really amazing as an opportunity. And part of that opportunity is, how are we standing for justice, standing for what just is in ourselves? How are we within ourselves? How are we standing for ourselves? And I just did a talk on this for a summit a little while ago. And one of the things that I just came out of my mouth, I don't know why I thought to say this, was how standing for yourself is walking into greater self-love. So how are we standing for ourselves in a loving, kind, caring way? It's not about being mean to other people. It's not about, making things more challenging, because I've had people say mean things to me and then saying, I'm just standing for myself. And I'm devastated. And it's like, yeah, we're probably never going to talk again, because I can't take that. And so this was with somebody I worked with many, many years ago. I was 23 at the time when it happened, but it just made such an imprint on me. And, this woman saying all these just horrible things. And then she's like, okay, just stood for myself. I'm like, okay, yeah, not going to talk to you ever again. I didn't go back to that job. It was a temporary job anyway, and it was ending in a couple of days. So I just called up and said, not coming back. That was how I handled it when I was 23. But how are we standing for ourselves in a loving, kind, caring way and walking into greater self-love? So that's a question for us to be with also this month.
And I would love to share a little bit about like the what we were mentioning about the underworld with Venus, to feel the astronomy part of it, like during that part, because it has helped me a lot, and I'm underworld Venus myself, and to understand that what it happens, because I have heard that then we are like detached from Venus, and it's like, no, in the underworld, it's just like you have to go through the sun in order to get to Venus. So it's like you need to burn the courage of the love of the sun, and through that, then you get to Venus, and there is such a surrendering energy in everything that you don't have a focus on the outcome. So for me, my whole life, every time I do something to get valued by others, it never works. It's an underworld Venus experience. It's like it doesn't work. When I just do it because, and it's also in Aries in my case, but I think in this one that is in Gemini is the same. Like the stories you want to share, the creativity that you want to share, do it for you first. And then if it's not valued, sometimes it's just not the time, and you are ahead of your time, and maybe it's going to be valued 20 years from now. Sometimes it's not the right audience, so they are not understanding. So just also being aware of who we share our words with, our creative endeavors, our projects, because not everyone is in the same vibration, in the same feeling, in the same experience. It's like if you are being an entrepreneur and you share with people who work for like super stable jobs, they won't understand what is required of an entrepreneur. So talk to people who know that they have done that work and who are like in a similar way. And at the same time, sometimes we just need to create for the creation itself. And I think also for me, in my deepest journeys and the deepest transformational processes, like with breath work, with really strong, deep trauma healing, creating art has been the culmination of the process. So like creating a painting that I have in my house, and it's just like there. Before recording, we were talking about soul retrieval. I think that is a way to kind of like, when you have done the work and a part of you is coming back to you, doing some stories, some paintings, some dancing, it really gets an imprint in the unconscious and the subconscious of this is real. This is my new me. So then you look at the painting and you know, okay, I have moved from there. And then you can see also how your drawings are evolving through time. And this is beyond they look good or not. It doesn't matter. They are for you. So you look at them and you see, oh, they are evolving. So before there was a lot of like anger, and now and now there is something different. So I think that is something that in this Venus cycle, it really can help us a lot with the underworld, because the Venus cycle started in Leo and the conjunction is going to be in Gemini. So creativity is all over the signature of this whole cycle. And creative living, like there is Julia Cameron, who has so many, like the way of the artist, doing these exercises, I think is really good. And she talks so much about it doesn't matter if the story is good or not. It doesn't matter if your writing is valued or published or not. You are writing just for the love of writing. And that can be applied to any arts. And I think to feel that your life is creative in itself is such a freeing experience that we all can have more of that. And I think this month is really a great time to explore the depth and the laughter and the humor with creativity as well. And to stay, like the critic can be aside. Like Saturn, go away for a little bit. And that's okay. It's like you can come back later. If I'm going to publish this work, you come back later and we have a look. But in the moment you are creating, your Saturn has to be a little bit relaxed during that time, at least.
That's so true. I mean, so Saturn is in Pisces, so there is already this relaxing, this loosening of the rules that we think we need to live by. I think there's this surrender to what actually matters. What I love so much about Saturn is like take away everything that's non-essential and make it so simple that we're so clear, like what's left over, we're just so clear that this is what is needed, this is what's useful to focus our energy on. And I'm a really big fan of tuning into the practices that help me to feel more focused, more concentrated, so that I can get to that space of clarity quicker, because there's that element of Saturnian efficiency. Gemini is a square energy to Pisces. So there will be an inevitable Sun Saturn square this month. We also have Mercury entering Gemini and Venus entering Gemini. And so there are going to be squares that come up, and there is going to be that tension of like, okay, what do I want to do right now versus like, what's the long-term vision or what I'm trying to build in a long-term sense, which is more Saturn. But sometimes we actually need to have that. I kind of have this visual of, like, say there's an older person, an older man. I don't know why I'm just choosing Saturn to represent an old man right now. He is building something. And this sweet little child comes through with a balloon. That's like the Gemini energy saying like, let's go play. Or let's say the child has a kite. That's more fun. So the child has a kite and the man's like, okay, I'm like over here trying to build a greenhouse. Like I need to focus. And the child's like, well, how about we just take a break and play for a little while? what would happen if that man goes and plays with the child? Well, he's more liberated, he's more alive, he's a little bit more energized, perhaps, to keep building and go back. So it's not to say like this is a all or nothing, it's not black or white. There's this invitation to bring, I think, a little bit more sweetness and an energy into what we're building with the square between these energies. It also reminds me, everything that you were saying, Maud, around creativity, which I think is so important. That's the bulk of the work that I do, is creative confidence and reminding ourselves constantly that we are here as creators. But that quote by Howard Thurman that says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go and do that. Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. And I think that is really some of the greatest power of this Gemini energy. I wanted to also go back in time a little bit to the beginning of Gemini season, where we have on May 23rd a whole lot going on. We have Venus conjunct Jupiter at 29 degrees Taurus. This is right before Jupiter enters Gemini and Venus enters Gemini at the same time. And there's this mastery energy between Venus and Jupiter. It's really interesting because the signature of a conjunction is a new beginning, kind of like a new moon when the sun and moon are conjunct. But the 29th degree is a signature of something ending or a graduation. So there's this interesting combination of like new beginning and graduation, and it's Taurus. And so I think we have this wonderful opportunity to really feel into how have we mastered our capacity to receive. That's really what I think of with Venus and Jupiter coming together in Taurus. It's like one thing to ask for what we want, and it's another thing to create the space to receive it, to also feel worthy and deserving to receive what it is that you're wanting. I think that's a big part of the Venus-Jupiter energy. And there could be that sort of graduation energy of, wow, I actually did it. Look at what I actually have already created space for. Look at how I've allowed my magnetic energy, which is Venus, to expand over this cycle and where she is in her cycle. And now that I've sort of completed that, now what's the new beginning? Now what next, after I'm so clear and aware of my worth, of my value, like what gets to be created now? Like we always have this idea when we're in a creative process that there's just one thing being created, like we're going from A to B and then we're done. It's like, no, we're always in this state of becoming. And so we graduate one element, one sort of level of learning, and then we come into the next one. So what did we learn? What have we been learning with the Taurus? Have we been tuning more into pleasure? Have we been tuning more into trusting our bodies and tuning to our senses? And are we feeling perhaps more safe in ourselves? And from that space of safety, allowing more in. And now that we're safe, we're receiving, now what do we get to play with? Now what do we get to create? So that is, I think, a really beautiful energy that we could just continue to reflect on throughout this Gemini season. And that same day, May 23rd, we have a full moon in Sagittarius. So the sun is at 2 degrees Gemini and the moon is at 2 degrees Sagittarius. And this is the axis of the ways of knowing. So speaking of fresh perspectives, just in case any of that was cut off, and we're kind of reiterating some things. I mean, that's literally the versatility and the adaptability and the flexibility that Gemini and Sagittarius invite us into. So how do we get to look at things from a new angle, even talk about things from a new angle, and know ourselves from a new angle, and to give fresh meaning, this more playful meaning? I mean, perspective is everything. When we change how we're looking at something, that thing changes. So with how do we combine all of this wisdom, the wisdom of the Taurus cycle that Jupiter's gone through and the shift into Gemini, the graduation moment of Venus and Jupiter conjunct at 29 degrees Taurus. How do we take all that we've learned from Taurus and then start to apply it? We're resourced now. We have the tools. We have perhaps maybe more patience with ourselves. We have more self-worth. Now, what do we get to play with and create from that space? So I'll pass it on. Hopefully that was coherent for those of you listening.
Oh, it's so good, Nura. And I love like everybody, like our boxes, our Brady Bunch boxes are like all rearranged in a different space now. So I love that. And I think, I think it's so perfect what you were speaking about, because that is the Gemini brilliance. How can you respond to the present moment energy, not how we think things are supposed to be? It's how things actually are in the moment, and how we can quick on our feet, Mercury, the quick-footed god. How can we be quick on our feet and just move with the energy and play with the energy? It's like the stand-up comedian who's playing with people in the moment, in the crowd, who are like bantering back and forth. And so there's this really beautiful invitation that when things are not going like we expect them, instead of maybe doing what can be so natural, that like frustration, that that kind of Saturnian energy, how can we actually soften and lighten up and just play with the energy? And I love all of everything that was coming up around creativity. And I love that, you all spoke to that with this Venus cycle starting in Leo. And then we have this halfway point, the resurrection, where we're rebirthing into more of our full essence, where we're in the underworld. We get to discover, after we've shed so many false stories and distortions we may have taken on about ourselves, we get to discover and embody who we are from more of our authentic heart essence. And we get to rise up and embody that more and more as Venus goes into her evening star cycle, which will be, later this summer for the Northern Hemisphere, winter for the Southern Hemisphere. And I just love this because I feel like this Leo cycle is so much about learning how to be more fully expressed, starting in Leo, fixed fire. So, and when we are fully expressed as ourselves, this is a creative energy. Life is creative. Like sometimes we might have this idea that we're just being creative if we're actually, intentionally creating something, this piece of art or this poem, and those are all creative, but also the way we living life truly alive is creative. And it's this magnetic energy. When we're really alive, this is like alive sun, magnetic Venus. When we're truly alive, it's a magnetic energy. We create life around us. We get to paint the canvas of our life. And so there's something really powerful about this resurrection point being in Gemini, that we get to discover ourselves from a totally new perspective. And so I really do feel that there's something really, really powerful about just getting to play with stories. And what if the stories we've told that run through our minds so automatically aren't actually true, right? Most of the time they can be our conditioning. They can be a part of ourself that was conditioned from our family or schooling or whatever growing up. So we get to discover this whole new story about ourselves, and we get to discover who we are and create a new story that more resonates and fits with that. And also, Jupiter going into Gemini as well. I believe it's right after that Venus-Jupiter conjunction, the 23rd. I think it's a few days later, maybe the 25th. Somebody can correct me if you know exactly when Jupiter's going into Gemini, but this is the expansion of our curiosity, expansion of play, expansion of new ideas, expansion of new expansive co-creative relationships. Gemini is a very relational sign. It wants to be in connection with everyone. And there's something too very powerful about this Venus Sun rebirthing point being in Gemini as well. This is wanting us to tap into when we get to be more of who we are and have this new curious perspective about who we are. We can relate with others in this new curious way, maybe free from some of our old unconscious patterns. So there's something about the co-creative power of the like relating with people that's gonna really come up with this new Venus Sun star point. So there's just this invitation to just play, although it can be a very serious energy in the underworld, to play with the energy and just meet the present moment. And maybe we can relieve ourselves of some of the seriousness when we're just let go of the expectations of how we think things should be, or when we feel like we're coming up to roadblocks, and just playing with it and saying, how can I dance with the energy? Because Gemini is such a multi-dimensional energy. I call all the mutable signs the multi-dimensional signs, because Pisces, is like the mutable sign before Gemini is everything's existing simultaneously, right? That cosmic ocean of oneness. And then Gemini is, where do we direct our mental energy into? Whatever we're directing our mental energy into, that's like the timeline that's projecting back to us. So we can play with putting our mental energy into new timelines and new stories.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. So I think now maybe we can just wrap this up with a sentence or thoughts or something that are Gemini related. And what comes to my mind is this being playful naturally liberates the mind and lifts the spirit. So take time to be playful, to have fun, to see the humor, and to experience the joy of what's present for us in the moment.
I just wanted to mention the new moon of June the 6th, and it feels such a fresh new beginning. So that will be my sentence as well, like the fresh, rewriting the story in such a fresh and renewed way. And during this new moon, we have Jupiter, Mercury, the moon, the sun, and Venus in Gemini. So it's such a really, we can start again. There is a new beginning coming, and we don't have to take all our baggage with us.
Yes, I love all of my Gemini friends for what they've collected in terms of people, places, things. There's always such a really beautiful curation. I mean, if I'm going to travel somewhere, I want to talk to the Gemini moon person, especially, or Gemini Mercury, somebody who's like, they're going to know all the best restaurants. They're going to know the time you should go. They're going to know when the farmer's market is and like where that specific stand is. I want to go pick out those flowers. So I am just always looking forward to what are the new collections? Am I going to be collecting a new way of thinking, a new way of relating with people? And especially after that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, it's like releasing the stagnancy of our possessions. It's like, okay, we cleaned out the space for the new collection, the new collection that is a breath of fresh air. So what are you collecting, and is it contributing to a greater sense of freshness and vitality in your life?
I love that. Oh, I think there's this really beautiful invitation to just continue to come back to the present moment again and again, and to play with the present moment. So much of the time, even, Venus being in Gemini, how we relate, so much of the time, we actually relate with others based on the story we have about them and the way we think they're going to respond to us. And so we're actually shifting, maybe even unconsciously shifting how we're relating and speaking and connecting with someone based on how we assume they're going to respond back to us already. We're like projecting out in the future. And so what if we let go of some of that and just let go of how we think other people are going to respond to us, and just be every moment, every person, every interaction like it's a new moment? Because so much of the time we actually trap other people into old versions of themselves, or we feel trapped into an old version someone else has of ourselves. So what if we just kind of cleared all that and just played with the moment, brought curiosity into our connections and into our communication and relating, and let each moment be a new moment and an opportunity to birth something new through our connection.
So we hope you all have a really fun Gemini solar month. And maybe the mantra is to just say, hey, let's have fun. Bye, everyone.
Here for it. Bye.